Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's just dive right in. Over the past few days, something pretty unprecedented happened. The United States launched a war, but without Congress actually signing off on it. Today we're going to unpack exactly how this went down and what it really means for American democracy.
So let's start with the event that pretty much shook the world this weekend. Early Saturday morning, a massive military assault was launched on Iran. And this wasn't a declaration of war from Congress. Nope, it came directly from the president, speaking from his resort in Florida.
Okay, so what exactly happened in those first few hours? The U.S. government has given it an official name, Operation Epic Fury. Let's get into the hard facts of how this all unfolded. So this thing was fast, a really coordinated blitz. You had Israeli forces going after top government officials, while at the same time, the U.S. was hitting military sites. And they were successful. They killed Iran's supreme leader, who'd been in power since, 1989? Iran didn't just sit back, though. They hit back almost immediately with missile strikes of their own, targeting both Israel and U.S. bases all over the Middle East. Now let's talk about the human cost in those initial hours. As you can see, the U.S. reported 0 casualties. But according to Iranian state media, around 200 people were killed and another 700 were wounded. And buried inside those tragic numbers is a really heartbreaking detail. Reports are indicating that 118 of the people who died were students at a girls' school.
Okay, so you've got this sudden act of war. How did the White House explain it? How did they justify this to the American people? And really, to the rest of the world? Let's break down the official story.
The explanation came in an 8-minute video, posted straight to social media. In it, President Trump really framed this mission as something both noble and absolutely necessary. The core reason? It was preemptive, to stop Iran from getting its hands on nuclear weapons. But here's the thing, that justification immediately hit a pretty big snag. It seemed to fly in the face of what the administration itself had said before, and maybe more importantly, what U.S. intelligence agencies were reporting. And this right here just lays that contradiction out perfectly. I mean, less than a year ago, after another round of strikes, the president himself said that Iran's nuclear facilities were, and I'm quoting, completely obliterated. So you gotta ask, right? How could a threat that was supposedly wiped out suddenly become so urgent that it required a full-blown war? And it wasn't just the president's own words that made people question the official story. U.S. intelligence officials had come out and said the threat was not imminent. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, found no evidence of an active weapons program. And the Defense Intelligence Agency? They figured it would take Iran at least a decade to even build a missile that could reach the U.S.
So, if an imminent nuclear threat wasn't the real reason, then what was? It's a fair question. And analysts immediately started digging for other possible motivations.
Well, one of the leading theories points right back to politics here at home. Just before the attack, the president's approval rating was really in the basement, just 37%. Nearly 60% of Americans disapproved of his job performance, especially when it came to the economy.
So, naturally, this has led a lot of people to speculate that this is a classic rally around the flag situation. A tactic presidents sometimes use to unite a divided country by focusing on a foreign enemy. Or, to be a bit more blunt about it, as some critics on social media have, dubbing it Operation Epstein Fury, maybe it's all just a giant distraction from scandals and economic troubles back home.
But there's another theory gaining traction, one that's maybe a little more transactional. Thinkers like Timothy Snyder are asking a pretty stark question. Are the U.S. Armed Forces now essentially a war-for-hire service?
And this is where things get really interesting. We have reports confirming that leaders in Israel and the Gulf Arab states, countries that have long seen Iran as their biggest rival, were pushing hard for this attack. The Saudi Crown Prince, for instance, made multiple private calls to the president arguing for a strike. And who was reportedly guiding the final decision? Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, two guys with very deep, very well-known financial connections to those exact same Middle Eastern powers.
So all these questions about why this happened, they all lead us to what might be the biggest, most alarming consequence of this whole operation. And it's not playing out in the Middle East. It's happening right here at home. To really get what's at stake here, we have to go back to the blueprint for American democracy, the U.S. Constitution. The framers were incredibly clear, really explicit about who gets to decide to take the nation to war. You have to remember, the founders had just fought a revolution against a king. They were absolutely terrified of putting that kind of power into the hands of one person. So they gave the power to declare war specifically to Congress, the people's representatives.
By launching a major war all on his own, the president has just walked right past that core principle, completely sidestepping the very branch of government that's supposed to be the ultimate check on presidential power.
And look, this wasn't just done without the approval of Congress. It was also done, it seems, against the will of the American people. Polling done right after the first strikes hit showed that only about a third of the country was actually for it, while 44% were actively against it.
And what's so wild about that is, historically, support for military action is always highest right at the very beginning. For a brand new war to kick off with such incredibly low public support, that's almost unheard of. So you have a war that was launched without a political mandate from Congress and without a public mandate from the American people.
And this is what really gets to the heart of the crisis. By launching this unilateral attack on Iran, you could argue the president has opened up a second, undeclared front.
And that right there is really the ultimate takeaway from what's happened over the last few days. When you ignore the Constitution, when you bypass Congress, and when you disregard what the people want, the action itself becomes an attack on the very democratic system you're supposed to be protecting.
And so that leaves us with one final and pretty heavy question that really cuts to the core of this whole thing. It's not just a question about foreign policy or some conflict happening halfway around the world. It's a question about power, about accountability, and about what happens to the rule of law right here in the United States.